morning in Asia trade, but still a little bit low, below $70 a barrel. Occasionally popping its head above $70 a barrel, but ultimately drifting down and staying below that level. Let's kick off this morning in Asia with Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. Narendra, I wanted us to kick off the conversation this morning to get your thoughts on the news out of Saudi Arabia regarding the Ukraine-US talks on a ceasefire in Ukraine. Obviously, we've seen very publicly in recent weeks that the relationship between Ukraine and the United States, its sort of biggest backer, if you like, financially, militarily at least, it has been somewhat stressed. Your thoughts on the outcome of the discussions in Riyadh this week and the announcement that Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire?
Well, I think it's encouraging, and but at the same time, we have to wait and see the response from Moscow, which is very important. And at the same time, over the day, I'm looking forward to reaction from European countries, especially Britain, Germany, and France. Let's see what they have to say, whether they're going to be on the table or they're not going to be on the table for the time being, or how, for instance, the United States and Ukraine, they've decided to move in a direction which is, for instance, would produce the results with the Europeans on board, and of course the Russians on board, Ukraine on board, and the US on board. So, I mean, there's so many ifs and buts at this stage, but I think if you look at it, diplomacy is always a very complex art. It takes time, and President Trump may want to stop the war in Ukraine in one day, but we all know that, it's far more complex. Diplomacy is a very complex business. So it's going to take some time, but I think the beginning is good. But however, it is important to remember that at the same time that President Trump, I think his agenda is good. Russia has already responded that they want to be on board, and Ukraine now has more or less, suggested they also want to be on board, which is good news. But at the same time, it's a good effort by President Trump. Intent is very good. The world needs peace in Ukraine, and it's important. We have to see that the past 3 years, we saw the war going on and on and on, and no serious effort was made by Britain or France or Germany to stop the war. So at least somebody has taken the initiative, and I think it must be welcome. We, of course, saw, both France and Britain convening European summit practically in no time. But I think where were they the last 3 years? We didn't see them. We didn't see any, that kind of initiative.
Well, so I mean, isn't there? I mean, a question. I mean, even the Chinese were commenting on this in recent days that ending the war by giving Putin everything he wants isn't exactly the kind of deal that Europe can sign up for. So in that regard, it's a bit disingenuous to say that Europe's doing nothing. Yeah, Europe is not giving Putin everything he wants. Now Trump appears to be willing to do that. So it is an issue.
I think let's not go by this, that we buy a narrative of country X or country Y in Europe and ignore narratives of other. I think it is important we all make a fresh.
I know you were the one moaning about Europe, so I had to push back a little bit.
No, but I'm saying let's make a fresh beginning. The fact is that Europe was silent. The fact is that Europe didn't take initiative. The fact is that Europe did what they did in London or in Paris in front of the world cameras to show that, look, we matter. Yes, of course you matter. But now the fact is that it's the US which is taking the initiative. And when it comes to Ukraine war, it's the US which matter because they are the one who are militarily more powerful. You are not. You look at the statistic. You can make loud. You may be collecting the entire world and say, look, these are the.
Well, I mean, I think the
important thing is to make a new beginning. Important thing is the US has taken initiative. Moscow has responded. Now Ukraine has also responded. Let Europeans not create hurdles. Let's all give peace a chance. European will get their opportunity.
You sound like John Lennon there. Robin Mills, CEO of Camar Energy, sort of weighing in on this conversation. It seems to be having little impact on the oil markets today. I'm still trying to figure out whether a ceasefire, a peace deal in Ukraine is bullish or bearish for oil prices. Your thoughts on the news and where it sort of follows through to impact energy and oil markets? Sorry, Robin, I cannot hear Robin. I cannot hear Robin. Is that me or
Oh, Robin has no audio. Robin, can you try again? We are seeing that you have your audio on, but you don't have audio.
Yusar or Narendra? Could you hear Robin?
No, I
No, I
can't.
can't. I
No.
can't.
Okay. Try again there, Robin. See what's happening.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you
Yeah,
bingo,
perfect.
bingo.
Okay.
All good.
Okay. Well, no, thanks, Sean. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I was first going to observe there's somebody else important we have to hear from in this, and that's Russia. And I'll be pretty skeptical personally that Russia is there for a genuine ceasefire, but a tactical ceasefire in which they then exploit to pursue some new gains. Yes, but okay, willing to be proven wrong on that. But that's pretty important, I think, for your question about oil markets, because Russia is under a lot of economic pressure, I think probably more than is generally appreciated, and getting out from under the sanctions that it's under is important. I don't think it makes too much difference to oil markets. I don't think there'll be a lot of extra oil on the market from Russia. Russia's constrained by OPEC limits anyway, and I'm assuming that kind of cooperation will continue. Now, it would make a difference, obviously, if the Europeans start allowing Russian oil back into Europe. It'll make a difference to flows, clearly. All of that cheap oil that was going to India and China will presumably then come back into Europe, and the Middle East will step up in East Asia again, and South Asia. So direction of flows, yes, but not in terms of overall markets and overall prices. But where it makes a huge difference, obviously, is in the gas market. If Russian gas comes into Europe, even in a moderate way, I don't suppose we'll ever go back to the past levels of Russian gas trade. But if some Russian gas comes back to Europe, that will absolutely put a lot of pressure on global gas prices. And we're coming into a few years probably of strong LNG supply anyway. So put that together with Russian gas, you'd definitely see a period of weak gas prices. And indirectly that affects oil as well, of course, helps ease the pressure on oil in some markets.
Yasar Al-Maliki, Gulf analyst at Middle East Economic Survey. In the middle of all of this sort of bombastic news over the last week, Yasar, of course, we had OPEC Plus announce and somewhat surprising the markets with the decision to proceed with their supply increases from April 1st, which sort of was an extra trigger to push prices below $70 a barrel. Your thoughts on that decision? Is it part of this wider sort of geopolitical negotiations going on in the world at the moment? We had Saudi Arabia host these talks over the last few days. They, of course, hosted Russia and the United States only a few weeks ago. Three of the world's three biggest oil producers. Is there intersection points here, do you think, between OPEC Plus and all of this geostrategic decision making?
Well, not necessarily. Thank you, Sean, first of all, and good morning to everyone. Well, not necessarily at the moment. I think the OPEC decision was basically OPEC sticking to its plan, that it's announced in December. And I think the key question for OPEC decision makers was not the timing. I think there was some expectations in the run up to the decision that we might have another deferment, given how, the impact of US tariff politics was on the market. Oil prices were already weakening. So when that decision came, it kind of came to a market that was already weak. So the geopolitical aspect of this, I think, in terms of Russia and in terms of its compliance with the OPEC plus cuts, in terms of whether it is going to is going to increase its exports, we will have some sort of a increase in the summer of Russian oil exports. And just to add to what Robin said, of course, removing the G7 sanctions and restrictions on Russia is going to be one of their main demands in any talks. But I think for now, this is not a big factor for the big OPEC Plus alliance. I think, again, the main question that was for the group was, is it, is the market too weak not to allow us to do this, not to allow us to go with our plan? I think internally there were two main issues. They wanted to preempt a market speculation that they are not willing to continue their supply management role in the market. And also going ahead with the decision was a balancing act, within the group itself to ensure cohesion between members who want to reduce the spare capacity and between, and also to ensuring that the focus reshifts on those who have been breaking their quotas. Because remember, the increments are modest at 138,000 a month. The plan was modified, to allow the schedule to be extended over 18 months rather than the 12 months initially. Even the UAE's 300,000 barrels per day uplift, instead of 9 months, that's going to go ahead with 18 months. But the two main factors here, and I'll end with that, is I think OPEC is going to keep its eye on market fundamentals, keep more pressure on compliance, especially with compensation cuts, because this could reduce the impact of the additions. And more importantly, I think they will also keep an eye on sanctions on Venezuela and Iran. So, when we started this, you said, oil price was going up to 70, coming back to 69. I think this was driven partly by yesterday's report from the EIA, the STO, the short-term energy outlook. And in that one, they slashed the surplus expectations and the buildup in and the sale and they downgraded the surplus for 2026 based on the fact that they see that sanctions are.
They got a memo from the foreign minister saying, we're going to put the squeeze on Iran. Yeah. Narendra, your thoughts on we followed through with this idea that there's a deal to be done in Russia. All of the different players are indicating a pathway there. What does that ultimately mean for India in context of this now very significant oil supply relationship with Russia? Do everything return to the pre-Ukraine war period where India was taking practically no Russian oil? Russian oil returns to its natural markets. How do you see it impacting the flows as we go forward?
Well, this is an interesting question. I think, Indian refiners now have discovered Russia in a big way, in the sense how to do business with Russia, how to bring that oil, and then also the Russian grade, how to refine it, and then, export it all around the world in terms of petroleum products. So I think ultimately it's going to depend on economics. If Russia can continue to offer attractive discounts, which, for instance, Saudi Arabia is very often not in a position, or they refuse to do that, then I think Indian refiners will continue to buy oil from Russia. May not be in the same quantity, but I think the Russian oil will continue to flow and will be among the top 2 or 3, suppliers to Indian refiners. I think, that's probably Russia has come to stay now in terms of, India sourcing crude from different geographies. It was not there earlier, as you know, but now it's going to stay there. And in terms of the space it occupies, that will depend on economics. But I think the way Russians and Indian companies are talking with each other, it looks like, like it's going to be long-term. Like Reliance Industry, India's the biggest, most powerful private refiner, they have entered into a deal with Rosneft for 10 years, worth $13 billion every year for 10 years. That means we are talking of $100 billion plus deal over the next 10 years. It's already there in place, and other refiners are also negotiating. So as he said, it all depends on economics, because India's strategy is very clear. We don't want to put all eggs in one basket. Middle East is important, but not all eggs in one geography. We want to import from as many geographies as possible. But the important thing is that in deep energy engagement with Russia is strategically important for India, because we want to see an autonomous a Russia which is kind of strategically autonomous, does not have to depend on China in particular too much, and at the same time is able to play the role, in depending on its kind of, geopolitical agendas and all that. So the way we look at Russia is very different from the way, for instance, countries in the West, or the people in the West, or the media in the West, they look at Russia. We have our own view, which is based on, for instance, our deep relationship with them over a long time. The same goes for the United States, very, very important country for it, and the same the European Union, very, very important. So what we are looking at right now is that
on that point, does India welcome this sort of fracture between the US and Europe, where Europe stands on its own strategic sort of defense and security, and is that a good thing for the world, that multipolar world that India is in favor of, that Europe and America find their own pillars What's your thoughts on that from an Indian
Well, this is
perspective?
this is a very, very interesting question. An independent Europe, a Europe which is independent, quote the German Chancellor, I think is good news. I mean, you have the United States, we have great relations with the US. Europe, we have great relations, but if Europe is independent of the US and a power, in its own right, and the second largest economy in the process, I think that's a wonderful news. And then you will have Russia, a major power, China, a major power, hopefully Japan, a major power, India, a major power. So what is happening is, the President Trump has accelerated this process, dismantling of the order that we have seen, we got used to over the past few decades. And now the new thing is going to emerge faster. But for us, for India, it might be happening 10 years too early. But at the same time, I think we're in a position.
Why 10? How do you get to that number, so to speak?
Well, 10, basically, I think we probably would have been more comfortable had it come, let's say, 10 years from now. By that time, we would have been, let's say, $10 trillion economy, and we would have been kind of militarily more powerful. And military, probably we could move faster to seize the opportunity to emerge as a kind of big power. But I mean, we'll get there. The only thing is now that we'll have to be a little bit more careful. But as I said, dismantling this order which West loves, Europeans love, that's kind of, passing into history is a great news. Emergence of a world order where countries like India, Japan, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Brazil, Mexico, they're all going to be new powers. And therefore, which means that what happens in the world will not be decided by one country or only the West. It will be now decided by people. It's like a rainbow high table. People from different geography. That's a great news.
You're very 1960s this morning. Give peace a chance. The rainbow. We have
to say that it's simply because an independent Europe. That means it's great news because independent Europe will have a lot to offer in terms of liberal order, in terms of free economy, and a kind of new way of looking at countries like Russia in particular, and also of course hopefully China if China starts behaving. So this is a very good beginning. I know in the West people are used to that order because they were enjoying the
they don't have
the
the security element gets severely questioned because obviously Europe. In its grand bargain with the US, didn't build up its own defense capabilities and will have to do so in a hurry now. Robin, we're getting a little bit down a rabbit hole there. Meanwhile, this week, the international global oil and gas industry are meeting in CERAWeek in Houston, sort of the world's largest thought leadership gathering of the industry, if you might say that. But it looks from a distance a bit like a victory lap over energy transition. The great energy transition has been slayed. Hurrah, hurrah. Your thoughts on what you're seeing coming out of CERAWeek, and particularly on that note, and whether it's a wise one for the industry to adopt?
Yeah, Sean, absolutely. That's the tenor of all the remarks. And in fact, this has been well set up, I think for a few months now. And you saw, of course, Dan Yergin's lengthy Foreign Affairs article just before CERAWeek, which was laying out exactly this thesis. And we've seen a lot of talk about energy pragmatism. Yeah, I don't think allowing runaway climate change is very pragmatic, to be honest. I don't think this is a smart way for the industry to go. Look, we know there's been a lot of stupid stuff done in climate policy, a lot of very poor policies. Everybody will hammer the Germans on nuclear power, and that's one, but there's plenty of other examples. Nevertheless, something needed to happen in low carbon energy. We needed to cut emissions drastically, and we still do. We've made some progress in low carbon tech, very good progress in low carbon tech, but very little progress in cutting emissions. And that is really going to bite the industry over the next 10, 20 years. So this is not a good turn from my point of view. I think there is a genuine kind of energy pragmatic path out there, which is about using hydrocarbons in a sensible way. And developing the new energy sources, which are getting better and better at the same time, and bringing in things like carbon capture and hydrogen and so on in the right places. There's absolutely a route for that. But there isn't something that's called climate pragmatism, but it's actually about going and developing oil, gas, and even coal everywhere, which is getting a big boost from the US right now, and downplaying the other energy sources. So that's not a helpful route at all. And I think the industry will regret it. And I think the industry is also closing its eyes on, how competitive these new energy sources are getting, and particularly, I would say, solar power and electric vehicles. And you look at the parts of the world that are leading this. Abu Dhabi has announced 24-hour solar power with batteries at probably, we think about 6 cents a kilowatt hour. That is an amazing achievement, and that cost will come down even further. Long term, even gas can't compete with that. And China, look at where electric vehicles are going in China, and that will turn up in other countries as well. And that is going to hit oil demand pretty significantly. And it's no use burying our heads in the sand in the name of some kind of idea of short-term pragmatism.
Even Donald Trump has bought a Tesla apparently overnight.
Yes.
Yes, in the supply world of OPEC plus oil, OPEC oil, we are now, it appears, finally close to Iraq restarting its oil pipeline from Kurdistan to Turkey, which previously carried 400,000 barrels of oil a day to the international markets. Your thoughts on the outlook for that happening and what impact it will have on Iraq meeting its quotas, etc.?
Thank you. The short answer to this is that the two governments, the central government and the Kurdistan government, in principle, have an agreement to, resume exports. And Baghdad is under a lot of pressure from Washington to do this. But, it will take a bit more time for the two governments and the IOCs to reach an agreement. I think from a market supply side, we have to remember that Iraqi Kurdistan's current production of around 300,000 barrels per day is already accounted for in OPEC secondary sources estimates of Iraqi production. What will happen is we will have some rerouting of these volumes through the pipeline, so there will not be an immediate supply addition. So the deal that they have, at least in principle, is for 185,000 barrels per day of these to be returned back to or to be, put back into the pipeline, and 115,000 would be sold locally, but there are a lot of disagreements. One of them is that the KRG, the Kurdistan government, wants Baghdad to pay for the local sales. Baghdad is not happy with these local sales because some of the crude and products, are sold across border to Iran and Turkey, which, the Iraqis call smuggling. At the same time, there are disagreements with the companies in terms of, their demands for the sanctity of their contracts to be respected, and also assurances of payment in terms of, previous errors and, they want future lifting agreements, that are solid. The KRG wants to stay as an intermediary, as a payment intermediary between, the government, the central government and the IOC. So that is a problem. So for now, to answer, the question, for now, Iraq, basically there will be some sort of a rerouting of some of those barrels into the international market. But in the run up to the end of the year, so if they reach this agreement, say this month, in the run up to the end of the year, you will have a reversal in the declines at the oil fields in Kurdistan. This could add up to 100,000 barrels per day of additional production. So at that point, Iraq will be pressed to do something about its southern exports to ensure that it stays within the quota. Now, the added pressure on Iraq is the fact that they need to front load their compensation plans as OPEC asked for, and then you have summer coming in, so they would need to increase their production to secure liquid feedstocks for power plants and also associated gas. 90% of Iraq's gas is associated. And in the midst of all of this, you have the US pressing for, to reduce energy imports from Iran. So it's a very tricky situation for the Iraqis to juggle all of this.
That is a lot, and particularly the last part, which obviously the Iranian gas is so critical to power generation, particularly in the hot months. Let's go to the survey question, which is looking at will a U.S. orchestrated ceasefire in Ukraine be bullish or bearish for oil prices? Maybe I should have put a third option there, no impact. But a bullish or bearish, the idea that there's a deal and more oil from Russia can flow, or flows return to normal or previous, or is it bullish in the sense that the end of the war signals a more stable global economic environment where trade can move and industry can grow and confidence and investment can happen. And so in that regard, bullish. So that's the question to the room today. Narendra, speaking of global trade and all of the things that are interrupting it, we are, of course, in the midst of the Trump tariff bonanza, and even your country and his very warm relationship with Narendra Modi is not exempt. And we seem to have two different narratives one out of Washington saying that India has committed to slashing import duties on US products, and the India government saying not so fast. No, we do not have plans to slash tariffs or slash import duties on US products. If we might just get your views on that sort of wider relationship, India, US, Modi, Trump, tariffs. We've seen the Canadians respond with a very robust posture. Is that the benchmark to copy, or is it the sort of Keir Starmer British approach of genuflecting in front of Trump and kissing the ring? Where do you see the right approach to deal with this very robust tariff strategy of the US government?
Well, I think we know Trump very well. We know how to deal with him, how to negotiate with him. His, intelligence chief is actually visiting India. Tulsi is visiting this weekend, and Vice President J.D. Vance is coming to India this month. And his wife is Indian, as you know, of Indian origin. I mean, and so we know the Trump administration 2.0 very, very well, and we know how to negotiate. So we are patient. We're not getting carried away by this tariff politics, which is probably more, for the domestic audience of the United States than the world outside. We're just looking at the picture with a cool mind. Let me give you an example. Like Apple has a big manufacturing unit in India. If they want to manufacture Apple products in the United States, given the wages there, cost of production is going to be at least 20%, if not more, higher. Are the American consumers ready to pay that 20% extra when they can get it from made in China or made in India, which is cheaper? The same goes for a number of other products. So I think let's wait. We are looking at the economics. We export steel, we export diamond jewelry, we export petroleum products, we export so many things from the United States. And we import much more from them, of course. But at the same time, I think we're not really unnecessarily worried or anxious. We are going item by item. We know how to deal with them. And at the same time, if it's a win-win for both the parties, both the countries, we're going to welcome it. If it's not a win-win for both, I think then we are going to continue to negotiate. That's how to do it. So that's why no strong reaction from us. We are just focusing on the economics. We know it. If they want to manufacture everything in the United States, relocate jobs, for instance, ExxonMobil jobs in India to the United States, back to the United States, and there are thousands working for ExxonMobil here, as you know, back office. So there's so many other things. If they start doing in the US, that means the cost is going to go up minimum by 20%, according to some economists in some items, maybe by about 40%. Are the American consumers ready to pay that price? So let's focus on the economics, what we are trying to do in India, and at the same time negotiating as strongly as we can.
Robin, I wanted just to wrap up with a sense of where do you think we're going with the oil markets, the oil price? We've seen this sort of recent step down post OPEC plus decision. The Brent has dropped into the 70s and still high 60s, but ultimately we've kind of dropped down a leg. We've broken out of that range where we were in for quite some time. Where do you think it goes from here? Is there any specific trigger for a direction of travel that will move it in either direction? Your thoughts?
Well, look, yes, I covered the OPEC side very well. Look, when the oil price anchors at 90, then everyone says 90 is OPEC's target. When it's at 80, everyone says 80. Now people are thinking 70. I think 70 is a challenge to defend. Look, is OPEC going to bring back 2.2 million barrels per day over the next year and a half? Almost impossible to believe that they are, unless something very weird happens. So I think the OPEC cuts are going to get paused again, or at least only dribbled into the market.
One of the ways to that pathway, Robin, sorry to jump in, but I know it's an area that you're very knowledgeable on, but is the sort of outlook that US can put the squeeze on Iran again and create a gap in the market for some OPEC plus barrels.
Yeah, maybe, but not 2.2 million, of course.
No.
But is there 500,000 there? Yeah, possibly. But the US has been throwing around some very aggressive stuff against Iran, and that would take a lot of Iranian oil off the market, but would have some very negative consequences, and might blow up in everyone's faces. So that's certainly one to watch. But look, the administration has not really kept a very consistent line on anybody yet, whether it's Iran. Trump actually says some quite dovish and friendly things about Iran in between all the hostility. And then, of course, the tariffs, it's just come 11 o'clock, so probably the tariffs have just changed again. So, very, very hard to say where that's going. So I just wonder, does this administration actually stick to a line on Iran, or where do they go when they discover all the effects that impact that's having on the oil markets?
It's our last word to you, and just looking through, we've got 9-1 bearish here in this room on this ceasefire news. But Yasar, just looking through, obviously we know where OPEC Plus is going next month. Given the commitment in a fairly weak demand window, your expectation they will continue with this monthly increase as they have already announced, that it won't be a decision every month. Your thoughts on the follow through of OPEC Plus beyond April?
I think, as I said before, they will keep an eye on market conditions, on compensation, and also on the impact of sanctions. I think, just to echo,
at $70 Brent, you think they're happy that it's a pretty good result from such an announcement last week?
I don't think they look really as much to the oil price. They look at two things: backwardation. If they are still at mild backwardation, they are happy with that, because this is where their marginal barrels make an impact. And even at 70 or below 70, Chinese buyers will be happy to enlarge their appetite and buy more oil. But I think, to answer this question, the message that OPEC put out, that it is going to pause these additions or even reverse them according to market conditions, is a very real one. And I was surprised that the market was surprised that Novak said that. And given that the market is more influenced by sentiment, right, and that the global economic landscape remains uncertain, I think they will keep a close eye on things, and especially on the sanctions bit. But they will need to see, whatever reductions in Venezuelan or Iranian oil, they need to check that this is sustainable for them to, for them to put more barrels in. I mean, the STIO, if you looked at the reports yesterday, I think the EIA says they anticipate that, some OPEC members will put back these cuts just to ensure backwardation and that stock buildups basically throughout the year. So we don't know, but I think it remains very driven by fundamentals and market conditions.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Narendra Taneja, as always, really great to get your insights. Thank you so much. Yasar Al-Maliki in London, Robin Mills in Dubai. Great to have your insights. Thank you so much. The oil price on Brent, as said at the beginning of our half hour together, still below $70 a barrel on Brent, but a little bit up this morning. We'll see if that sustains. Will anything particularly come in? For a result on our survey of 9-1 bearish, it doesn't seem like that is showing up in the oil market yet, because of the news yesterday of the ceasefire, at least from the Ukraine side. If indeed Russia agreed, would we then see that bearish tone come into the oil price, or is it already priced in? Be interesting to see the noise out of Moscow over the next few days.